They thought firing me would be the punctuation mark. What they didn't understand is that systems don't end when you delete a name from an org chart. Systems end when the quiet parts stop cooperating. My name is Alara Voss, and for 17 years, I built the connective tissue that kept Kestrel Meridian from bleeding out in public. I wasn't the face of anything. I wasn't on stage at town halls. I wasn't in the glossy, Our People decks. And I sure as hell wasn't in the CEO's LinkedIn selfies where everyone holds a coffee cup like it's a strategy. I was the person you only noticed when something went wrong. Which is why, on the Monday they decided to make me a lesson, they did it in a room full of people who owed their calm mornings to work they never bothered to learn. Monday started like most Mondays. Stale air, fluorescent confidence, and the faint hum of a building pretending it didn't run on panic. At 9:32 a.m., I walked toward the executive conference room with my notebook tucked under one arm and a folder that contained two things: an annotated audit of our back-end layers and a weekend of my life I wasn't getting back. I wasn't expecting gratitude. I wasn't even expecting politeness. But I was expecting logic. Kestrel Meridian had made its money on enterprise routing, moving complex shipments through messy realities without losing the thread. The kind of company that sells certainty to people with bigger budgets than patience. Certainty is expensive. Certainty is also fragile, and I had spent years making hours feel effortless. The conference room door was slightly open. I could hear the muffled rhythm of voices in a shape that didn't match a normal meeting, too rehearsed, too clean, like a stage manager had ordered everyone to hit their marks. When I stepped inside, the room had that expensive coldness executive spaces love. Black glass table, chairs with enough leather to make you feel guilty for sitting, and a screen on the wall that displayed the company logo like a flag in a conquered territory. At the head of the table sat Julian Reeve, our new CEO, wearing a suit that looked like it had been tailored by someone who charged extra for arrogance. His tie was perfect. His smile was even better, sharp, calibrated, the kind of expression that says I've never been wrong in a room where people can fire you. Around him, the leadership team, people I'd watched rotate in and out over the years like seasonal Daker. A few familiar faces. A few new ones with fresh haircuts and the eager posture of people who believe they've arrived somewhere important. And then there was Mara Lynn, my former mentee, sitting 2 seats down from Julian, hands folded neatly, eyes on the table like the grain had interesting opinions. She didn't look up when I entered. That was the first clue. Julian lifted his chin, as if he was greeting an audience. "Alara," he said, with the tone of someone who'd practiced my name in the mirror until it sounded like a brand. "Let's keep this brief." I stopped just short of the table. My notebook felt heavier in my hand than it should have. "Sure," I said, calm, neutral. The voice you use when you're about to diffuse a problem you didn't create. He didn't waste the silence. "As of this moment," Julian continued, fingers interlaced on the table, "your position is being dissolved, effective immediately." No theatrics, no raised voice, no dramatic pause for the soft-hearted. Just a sentence dropped into the room like a stone into deep water. A couple of people inhaled. No one spoke. The air didn't explode. It thinned. You could hear tiny nervous noises. A pen tapping once, a chair shifting, the dry whisper of a sleeve against leather. I scanned faces for something, anything, recognition, discomfort, protest. Most people's eyes had drifted downward as if the tabletop had become suddenly magnetic. Mara's gaze stayed fixed on the same spot in front of her. Not even a flinch. Julian slid a sealed envelope across the glass toward me like he was settling a check at a restaurant. "You'll find the severance package outlined here," he said. "HR will coordinate your offboarding. You'll be escorted out by noon." Escorted, like I might steal a chair. I didn't reach for the envelope. I didn't sit. I didn't argue. My pulse was steady in a way that would have made me worry if I weren't me. Because it wasn't a surprise. Not the fact of it. Not the style. Not even the timing. The timing, in particular, was almost adorable. 9:40 a.m. on a Monday. I had that time written down months ago, not in a diary, in a trigger. Julian watched my face, searching for the crack, panic, anger, humiliation. The moment he could later describe to the board as difficult but necessary. I gave him nothing. "Understood," I said. The room stayed silent, like everyone had agreed that witnessing was optional. I placed my badge, my laminated, unglamorous little rectangle of permission, on the center of the table. Not tossed, not slammed, just set down, neat as a period at the end of a sentence. Julian's smile didn't move. It stayed in place the way a well-designed logo does. I turned. On my way out, I passed Mara. Her perfume was the same one she used to wear when she sat in my office late at night, learning how to read logs like they were honest. Back when she asked real questions. Back when she didn't have to choose between the person who taught her and the person who signed her bonus. She still didn't look up. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she wouldn't survive it if she did. I walked out without a sound. Only when the door clicked shut behind me did something inside my chest loosen. Not into sadness, not into rage. Into certainty. Because the thing about quiet people is we don't do sudden moves. We do preparation. And the thing about systems is they remember. The elevator ride down was short and painfully normal. The building didn't know I'd just been erased. It kept humming. Lights stayed on. Security cameras watched with the same bored patience they always had. I stood alone in the polished metal box, staring at my reflection. Neutral face, neat hair, the expression of someone going to pick up groceries, not someone who just got publicly removed from the thing she built. I didn't break down because breakdowns require surprise. I didn't call a lawyer because I didn't need adrenaline to be effective. I didn't rush to my car because haste is for people who didn't plan. Instead, I did what I always did when something changed in a way that mattered. I checked the system, not Kestrel Meridian's public dashboards, not the corporate status board with its cheerful green dots and lies. I checked mine. My phone stayed in my coat pocket until the elevator doors opened. In the lobby, I walked past the receptionist, who gave me a polite glance that slid off me like rain. I stepped outside into the cold air and took out my phone like I was reading a text. I wasn't. I was looking at a log. A clean, minimal console, black background, pale text, running through a secure channel most people at Kestrel Meridian didn't know existed. A channel I'd built in an era when leadership changed like weather, and every new executive came with a different appetite for control. The console title wasn't dramatic. It wasn't named after a myth or a weapon or an ego. It was named after a function. Latch, because that's what it was, a latch, a mechanism. A simple little thing that holds a door closed until the right hand opens it. I watched the live feed update. Credential event detected revocation type. Administrative origin. Executive network authorization signature. Unrecognized and then. Contingency state. Armed mode. Silent stabilization timer. Started if you're imagining flashing red alerts. Stop. There were no sirens. No cinematic countdown graphics. No skull icons. Latch didn't do drama. Drama leaves fingerprints. Latch did what I designed it to do. It slowed the company down in a way that felt like coincidence, not sabotage. Not because I wanted to hurt people. Because I wanted to expose a truth Kestrel Meridian had spent years training itself to ignore. They didn't own their stability. They rented it from someone they refused to see. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and walked to my car like nothing had happened. The sky was bright and indifferent. People passed me holding lunch bags and coffee, laughing at something that didn't matter. I drove home without turning on the radio. I didn't build Latch when I was angry. I built it when I was soberly realistic. Years ago, before Kestrel Meridian became a darling of enterprise logistics, it was a chaotic startup with a talent for selling promises it couldn't technically fulfill. Their infrastructure was a patchwork. Mismatched vendors, brittle code, security policies written like apologies. They hired me as a contractor during a week when 3 client migrations failed, and someone tried to fix it by restarting the wrong server and deleting an entire staging environment. I walked in, looked at the mess, and asked the only question that mattered. Who has the keys? No one answered. Not because they didn't know. Because the truth was embarrassing. The keys were everywhere. So I did what I always do. I created a layer that didn't depend on anyone's good intentions. A relay that sat quietly between critical transactions, validating, throttling, logging, and correcting without fanfare. A private skeleton that held the body upright. Over time, it became indispensable. Over time, indispensability became invisible. That's the irony. If you do your job too well, people forget you exist. And leadership, especially the kind that arrives wearing a perfect tie and a hunger for the spotlight, doesn't like ghosts. Julian Reeve had been here less than a quarter when he started using phrases like operational elegance and removing single points of failure, which would have been adorable if he hadn't been staring directly at me every time he said it. I recognized the language. I recognized the pattern. And that's when I made one small addition to Latch. A contingency, a rule, a simple agreement between me and the system. If my access was revoked under hostile conditions, meaning no proper reauthorization, no transfer ceremony, no documented handoff, Latch would stop lending the company its spine. Not by pulling the plug, by loosening the bolts, just enough, just gradually. So the people who loved tidy narratives could finally meet a truth that didn't fit in a slide deck. There is no transformation without the people who hold the wires. By the time I got home, the first confirmation had already appeared. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of subtle shift that makes teams start blaming one another. A delayed token refresh, a permissions mismatch that shouldn't happen, a background job that ran 5 minutes late. Those are the tiny fractures that become expensive once executives decide to pretend they're normal. I set my bag down, took off my coat, and made tea like I had all the time in the world. Because for the first time in a long time, I did. My laptop opened with a familiar hum. I logged into my private console through a device certificate I'd registered years ago, back when security at Kestrel Meridian meant don't click suspicious links. The dashboard loaded. No fireworks, just a quiet confirmation line, silent stabilization, active under it a list of events, small, clean, undeniable. Latch wasn't punishing anyone, it was teaching. And somewhere, back in that building full of polished glass and borrowed confidence, Julian Reeve was about to learn the difference between firing a person and firing a foundation. I took a slow sip of tea and watched the feed update again. The story had started. Not in the conference room, not in the envelope Julian slid across the table, but in the part no one ever bothers to look at until it's too late, the quiet layer underneath everything. And I was still holding it. They didn't call it a demotion. They never do. 2 days after my exit, an email arrived from HR dressed in the soft language companies use when they want to disappear you without the mess. Subject, updated engagement structure effective immediately. Your role will transition to external systems advisor under the office of the CTO. No office, no team, no authority, just a title designed to sound useful while removing gravity. They let my badge keep working on select floors. They let my email stay active, with my title stripped down to advisor temp. They gave me a shared desk on the second floor, wedged between a printer that jammed twice a day and a wall that still had adhesive marks where someone else's nameplate used to be. It was clear. I wasn't being transitioned. I was being erased. The building treated me differently now, not with hostility. That would have required courage. With absence. People who used to ask for my input in hallways suddenly found reasons to check their phones. Conversations paused when I walked by, then resumed half a beat too late. They weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of being seen with me. That's how power really works in corporate spaces, not through authority, but through permission to exist. And mine had been quietly revoked. Julian Reeve wasted no time rewriting the story. Within a week, the lobby screens were running a new looped video. Kestrel Meridian, reimagining the backbone. Soft music, abstract graphics. Words like agility, streamlined, future-ready floating across the screen like promises no one planned to audit. The company-wide town hall followed shortly after. I wasn't invited directly, but my calendar still caught the blast email, all staff welcome, And someone in HR mentioned, without meeting my eyes, that technical presence optics would benefit from my attendance. So I went. I took a seat in the back row, far right, where no one had to acknowledge me to speak. The stage lights came up. Julian stood front and center, sleeves rolled, voice tuned perfectly for confidence without accountability. "We're entering a new phase," he said. "One focused on simplification, removing legacy dependencies, empowering fresh perspectives." Behind him, slides bloomed with clean UI mock-ups and arrows pointing forward. And then he introduced his hand-picked team. They looked like they'd been cast. Neutral-toned wardrobes, identical sneakers, the posture of people who had never been blamed for a system outage in their lives. Among them was Noah Pike, 27, maybe 28. Perfect hair. A smartwatch he checked like it might whisper validation. And beside him, Mara, she had a new title now, transition lead. It suited her the way borrowed confidence always does, almost. She smiled as she spoke. Calm, measured. The same cadence I'd coached her into years ago when she panicked before her first infrastructure review. "We're moving away from outdated constructs," she said into the mic, "toward a modular, scalable system that's easier to maintain." I watched carefully, because every diagram she showed was familiar. The routing logic, mine. The failover paths, mine. The security envelope, still latch, quietly validating, filtering, compensating. They'd painted over the walls, not realizing the foundation was unchanged. No one in the audience noticed. They clapped at the right moments, nodded when told to nod. That's when Noah took over the demo. On Wednesday afternoon, I found him in the staging room staring at a tablet with the expression of someone trying to read a map written in a language he didn't know existed. "You're Alara, right?" he asked, hopeful. "The systems advisor," I nodded. "Cool, quick thing." He turned the screen toward me. "This directory cluster here, no labels, no activity for months. Safe to archive." My stomach tightened. It wasn't inactive. It was decoy architecture, a shadow layer designed to absorb curiosity and protect the real paths underneath. Deleting it wouldn't crash anything, but it would trigger latch preservation logic. "You shouldn't touch that," I said evenly. "It's tied to legacy routing dependencies." Noah smiled. The smile people wear when they think experience is just fear in a nicer outfit. "No worries," he said. "Already queued it for cleanup. Gotta remove dead weight, right?" I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked away, because Latch was already responding. Noah's deletion request executed cleanly. From his perspective, the system dashboard showed success. The directory disappeared. The logs reflected completion. In reality, Latch had done 3 things in under 200 milliseconds. Cloned the structure to a shadow environment, masked the original path behind a false completion layer, rewrote the access logs to prevent follow-up investigation, no alarms. No alerts, just quiet correction. The company had just been saved from a catastrophic exposure it didn't know existed. Again, and no one thanked anyone. Mara avoided me after that, not aggressively, just strategically. When our paths crossed, her smile was polite, thin, performative. We'd spent 6 months together once. Late nights, broken test environments, her hands shaking as she learned to trace failures without panicking. I'd taken the blame for her once. Covered a misrouted financial packet that could have cost us a client. I never mentioned it. Now she stood shoulder to shoulder with people replacing me, speaking my language like it had always been hers. They weren't just replacing systems, they were replacing memory. The real fracture came on Thursday. Another demo, another room, another version of innovation. This time, the phrase on the screen made my jaw tighten. Rethinking the backbone. It was pulled, word for word, from an internal architecture brief I'd written years ago. Except now, it was being used to dismantle the very thing it once described. I took my seat in the same corner. No introduction, no acknowledgement. Mara opened the session. Noah ran the config walkthrough. Everything was going smoothly until Noah misused a term. He called a subnet scheduler a floating token distributor. It wasn't just wrong. It was dangerously wrong. I raised my hand, not high, not dramatically, just enough. Mara saw me. She hesitated, then smiled into the microphone. "Ilara," she said, voice perfectly tuned for civility, "we appreciate you being here. But since you're no longer part of the active architecture team, let's let the current leads continue." A few heads turned. Most didn't. The silence afterward wasn't loud. It was empty. I nodded once, stood, and walked out. The hallway felt colder than it should have. I poured myself a cup of burnt coffee from the corner machine and sat on a gray bench that still remembered people. That's when I noticed the intern. Caleb, maybe 19 or 20, phone half raised, eyes wide. He'd been recording the demo for notes, for LinkedIn, for proof that he was there. And he'd captured the moment. Me being dismissed, the room doing nothing. Our eyes met. He flushed, lowered the phone, and disappeared down the hall. By the afternoon, I heard whispers near the elevators. "Did you see what happened to Ilara? They just shut her down mid-session." No one said it to me. No apology. No, "Are you okay?" Just corporate silence, clean, chilled, impenetrable. I finished my coffee and checked my phone. Latch's feed updated quietly. Unauthorized rename attempt credential mismatch auto-restore complete operational. Still holding. That night, I drove home with the humiliation sitting in the back seat like something heavy and unresolved. I didn't turn on the lights when I entered my apartment. I went straight to my desk, opened my laptop, drafted a resignation email, read it, deleted it. I didn't want to quit. I wanted to stop bleeding in public. I opened the Latch console instead. One command. That's all it would take. I could wipe it, remove myself completely. Let the company feel what they'd dismissed. My fingers hovered. And then I stopped. Because systems don't exist in isolation. Clients would suffer. Workers who didn't choose this leadership would suffer. So I closed the window, opened the logs, and froze. Unauthorized access attempt. Time, 8:14 p.m. origin. Internal network credential, M. Lynn Mara. She wasn't just replacing me. She was trying to take the system. I didn't scream, didn't curse. I just activated watch mode. Latch blinked once in confirmation. Monitoring initiated. I closed the laptop and sat back in the quiet. This time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt loaded. Because now, it wasn't just a system watching them. It was me. And they had no idea how close they were to discovering what happens when the illusion of control finally breaks. By Friday morning, the illusion had collapsed. Not loudly. Not all at once. It collapsed the way carefully stacked lies always do, one inexplicable failure at a time. Payroll stalled first. Not fully broken, just hesitant. Credentials worked on the second try, then the third. Emails queued without sending. Calendars desinced by minutes that somehow mattered. People restarted laptops. It rebooted services. Julian sent calm, empty messages about temporary instability during transition. No one used the word systemic yet. They weren't ready. I watched it all from my apartment. Sunlight cut across the desk where my laptop sat open, Latch's console glowing softly like a heartbeat. No red warnings, no alarms. Just a steady accumulation of friction. That was the point. Systems don't fail when they collapse. They fail when they stop trusting themselves. By noon, the first escalation hit. External consultants. I could see them the moment their devices touched the network. New fingerprints, clean signatures, expensive habits. A cybersecurity firm from DC, judging by their routing patterns and the arrogance of their probes. They began with surface scans. Found nothing, went deeper, brushed the outer layers of Latch. At 9:07 a.m., one of them almost saw it. Almost. Latch rerouted him gently, logged the curiosity, let him believe he'd hit a dead end. He tried again. That's when Latch stopped being polite. Access revoked. Credentials erased. Presence removed. Not blocked. Deleted. The consultant vanished from Kestrel Meridian's internal systems like he'd never existed. I exhaled slowly. Not relief, disappointment. I'd hoped, briefly, that someone might recognize the architecture, understand it, respect it. Instead, they tried to dismantle it with a crowbar. Inside Kestrel Meridian, panic finally found language. An emergency board meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Investors only. Closed session. I wasn't invited. I didn't need to be. Latch was already there. Someone Mara, I suspected, uploaded a transparency audit file to the shared drive for the meeting. She didn't know the file acted as a bridge. She didn't know Latch lived inside every transaction it validated. I watched the meeting unfold from my apartment as calmly as if it were a weather report. Julian spoke first. Controlled, scripted, blamed residual legacy dependencies. Promised resolution. Heads nodded. Then a voice cut through the noise. Calm, older, certain. Who owns Latch? The room froze. Julian blinked. The system is proprietary, built internally. That's not what I was told. The name on the screen carried weight. Irene Caldwell. Early investor. The kind that doesn't ask questions unless she already knows the answers. I met Alara Voss 3 years ago, Irene continued. At a partner dinner in Boston, she sketched an architecture on a napkin. Said it was the nervous system behind the noise. A pause. I kept the napkin. Silence thickened. Julian's confidence drained visibly. Mara's hands stilled above her keyboard. So, Irene said evenly, I'll ask again. Who owns Latch? No one answered, because they couldn't. I closed the console after the meeting ended early. 20 minutes. No reassurances, no resolutions, just questions. Expensive ones. That night, my lawyer called. They made a mistake, she said. A serious one. Kestrel Meridian had sent a legal notice earlier that day, accusations dressed as concern. Sabotage, unauthorized access, breach of confidentiality. I'd expected it. What they hadn't expected was evidence. Blueprints, timestamps, server registrations, licensing drafts, authorship. By morning, the narrative had flipped. By Monday, Julian stopped appearing in internal communications. By Wednesday, Mara was quietly removed from transition leadership. I didn't celebrate. Recognition doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like gravity returning to its place. The offer came quietly. A smaller company, Boston-based, run by people who asked better questions. No politics, no theater. Just this line at the end of the email, we don't need a miracle. We need a foundation. Will you build it? I said yes. Latch didn't follow me, not exactly. I archived it, then I rebuilt it. Out in the open this time, documented, shared, understood. No shadows, because systems don't need secrecy to be powerful. They need respect. Sometimes people ask if this was revenge. It wasn't. Revenge is loud, wasteful, temporary. This was alignment. They fired a title. They ignored a foundation. They mistook silence for weakness. And they learned, slowly, painfully, that some systems don't shout. They just outlast the noise. If you've ever been overlooked, erased, or replaced by someone who never understood what you built, remember this. You don't need to burn the building down. You just need to remind them who laid the bricks.